I have carried these memories longer than continents have carried their mountains. I speak now not as a creature of flesh, nor bone, nor scale, but as one of the first beings, those who stirred before the world learned to breathe. Though time has ground most of my kind into dust finer than starlight, I remain, drifting at the edges of forgotten epochs. My story is an echo of lives long erased, of worlds built and destroyed by paws, wings, and claws more ancient than humankind could imagine. I remember awakening into a world still soft and forming. I had no name then, for names were inventions of minds far younger. I was simply aware of the trembling crust beneath me, the molten rivers pulsing like veins, the storm circling the newborn sky in great spirals of fire. I rose from the primeval haze, shaped from vapors older than rain, my form shifting until it matched my will. I chose the body of a beast, four-limbed, thick-furred, built to endure the chaos around me. I was neither predator nor prey, for nothing yet lived that could fear or be feared. The world was vast and raw. Continents split like broken ice. Seas boiled with volcanic breath. The air vibrated with the heavy hum of creation, layers of heat and minerals swirling like unseen tides. I walked across unfrozen plains of black stone that steamed beneath my weight. Every step felt like trespassing on an unfinished canvas. I was the first witness, the earliest wanderer, and the silent guardian of a world that had not asked for my guardianship. Centuries blurred into one another as the planet cooled. Crystals formed, forests sprouted, oceans calmed into silver-blue expanses. I watched life crawl into existence, fragile, trembling, determined. Small creatures scuttled in the shade of colossal ferns, their bodies soft, their movements frantic. I observed them with the patience of one who had no end. I learned the rhythm of their breaths, the instincts programmed into their beating hearts. They grew more numerous with each cycle of the moons, and though they never sensed my presence, I learned from them what it meant to live with purpose. As ages passed, I changed as the world changed. My fur grew shorter as the air cooled and thickened. My body grew stronger, more defined, shaped by necessity and the slow wisdom of experience. I roamed across continents as they drifted closer, then tore apart again. I walked through deserts glittering with powdered glass, across tundras where the cold carved patterns in the snow like ancient script, and into jungles where vines grew as thick as tree trunks. The first great beasts eventually emerged, towering forms that shook the earth with each colossal stride. They moved with the arrogance of new rulers, their bodies armored, horned, fanged. I watched them grow dominant, shaping the land with their hunger and size. They roamed the world as though they owned it, striding through forests and plains as lords of a realm too young to resist them. I traveled alongside them, unseen but ever present, learning from their rise and their inevitable fall. The era of giants ended in fire and darkness. I felt the trembling long before the others sensed danger. The sky dimmed. The air thickened. A silence fell across the world, deeper and heavier than anything I had ever known. Then came the flash, bright enough to slice through time itself. The land groaned as something vast collided with the earth, sending shockwaves through the bones of the planet. Ocean water rose like living mountains and collapsed again, swallowing coastlines whole. I survived only because I had always been something more than mortal. My body dissolved into the ancient vapor from which I had once been shaped, drifting above the burning forests and storms of ash. I watched an entire era end, the great beasts falling lifeless into the ruins of their kingdoms. Their roars faded from memory within a single cycle of seasons. In the centuries that followed, I reshaped a body once more. Smaller this time, more agile, better suited for the changed world. I chose the form of an animal that could slip between shadows, climb through forests, and race through newly formed meadows. The world had quieted, recovering slowly. New species, smaller, faster, keener, took the place of the fallen giants. Their eyes held curiosity rather than raw instinct. They built burrows and nests, cared for their young, and adapted with remarkable resilience. I walked among them, learning their ways. Some lived in packs, bound by loyalty older than language. Others roamed alone, depending solely on their strength or cunning. I learned to feel hunger, satisfaction, fatigue, and the first hint of fear. These sensations grounded me, tethering my ancient awareness to the immediacy of physical life. I grew to appreciate the triumphs and tragedies that shaped the smallest of creatures. Millennia passed. I changed forms again and again, sometimes furred, sometimes scaled, sometimes winged. I lived in treetop canopies where the wind sang through the leaves like distant memories. I swam in rivers cold as new-fallen stars. I curled beneath roots older than entire civilizations. With each new form, I learned a different truth about existence. Through the patient heartbeat of a grazing animal, I learned peace. Through the fierce lungs of a predator, I learned the weight of survival. But something darker awaited. I sensed it long before it arrived. A shift in the world's balance, subtle yet undeniable. The air grew warmer, storms more violent. Entire habitats shifted as though they too felt a coming upheaval. I traveled to the highest peaks, searching for answers in the movement of the wind. Yet the warning remained faint, like a whisper beneath the ground. When the upheaval finally came, it was not sudden like the ancient fire from the sky. It was slow, creeping, insidious. Species vanished one by one. Forests thinned. Rivers receded. The songs of life that once echoed across every continent quieted. I felt the loss as though it were carved into my being, each extinction a small death within myself. For the first time in all my ages, I felt fear, not for my survival, but for the survival of the world I had watched grow from nothing. Yet even in the fading shadows of dwindling life, something new stirred. A species unlike any I had seen before began to rise. Upright thinking, shaping the land with tools instead of instinct. They were fragile, lacking claws or fangs, yet driven by an inner fire. Their minds buzzed with invention and destruction in equal measure. I watched them from the forests, from mountain ridges, from riverbanks. They did not know me, though I had lived through ages beyond counting. They altered the earth faster than anything before them. Their ambition frightened me, yet it also fascinated me. For the first time, I felt that the world was no longer mine to guard alone. And so I continue, wandering, remembering, witnessing. I have lived 1,000 lifetimes in 1,000 shapes, yet the weight of memory grows heavier with each passing era. I fear what may come, yet I endure, bound to a world that no longer remembers me, though I remember every heartbeat of its creation. What follows in the next 2 sections is the continuation of my chronicle. The rise of storms, the birth of forgotten empires of beasts, and the final catastrophe that erased nearly all traces of my ancient kin. I remember the first dawn after the age of giants ended. The world seemed hollow, as if its spirit had been scorched away with the last of the titans. The air still tasted of dust and buried fire. But beneath the quiet remained a pulsing promise. Life was not done with this world, and neither was I. My form then was lean and swift, a creature built to survive in a land that had forgotten its former rulers. Yet deep inside, beyond sinew and breath, I still carried the ancient fire that had birthed me. As time stretched onward, the earth shed its wounds. Green returned, shy at first, then bold and unstoppable. Trees rose again like pillars of rebirth. Rivers found their pathways, carving through stone to reclaim the rhythms they had followed for millions of seasons. With them returned the voices of animals, new, unfamiliar, vibrant. Small mammals scurried through undergrowth, quick-witted and bound by instincts sharpened by struggle. Birds evolved into creatures whose wings carved poetry across the sky. Insects thrived with relentless determination, turning decay into creation. I wandered through this rejuvenated world and felt a strange ache within me. I had seen countless cycles of growth and ruin, yet something about this age felt different, more deliberate, as though the world itself remembered the devastation and sought to rebuild with wisdom, not chaos. Then came the era I now call the Age of Roaring Empires. They were not empires built by hands or stone, nor guided by rulers who wrote laws or forged crowns. They were empires shaped by instinct, by hunger, by territory, by survival. And I, being eternally tethered to the evolution of life, found myself drawn into their rise. At first came the great predators. They emerged from the shadows of the forests, their forms varied and magnificent. Some ran on paws that thudded like muffled thunder. Others stalked silently, their footsteps ghosts upon the earth. Their bodies were honed by necessity, lean, powerful, designed for the swift claiming of life. I took the form of one such predator, learning the world through muscles coiled like springs and senses sharpened beyond mortal comprehension. I felt the blood surge in my veins as I raced across plains newly formed by shifting winds. I tracked scents carried miles through the air. I knew the tension of the hunt, the power of a body built for pursuit. Through this form, I came to understand the fierce order that governed predator and prey. It was not cruelty but balance, a sacred rhythm older than the birth of continents. Soon, herds of massive creatures filled the plains. They gathered in numbers so vast that the earth trembled beneath them. Their bodies carried the warmth of the sun in their thick hides, and their migration patterns carved invisible roads across the land. They were the heartbeat of the New World, and predators followed them in silent reverence. For ages, this balance prevailed. But every empire, even one forged by nature alone, faces challenges that reshape its destiny. The first disruption came from the sky. Storms unlike any I had known began to form along distant horizons. They rose in towering spirals, black as volcanic midnight, swirling with energies that felt almost intelligent. I sensed them long before I saw them, their presence humming through the bones of the earth. When they arrived, they moved with devastating purpose, tearing trees from their roots and reshaping entire landscapes in hours. Animals fled in vast numbers, abandoning territories that had been theirs for generations. New rivers formed where none had existed before. Lakes evaporated, replaced by chasms carved by winds sharp enough to flay bark from ancient trunks. I retreated into caves and ravines, shifting my form to one better suited for endurance. Even I, who had survived the fall of worlds, felt humbled by the destructive might of these tempests. The storms passed only after days of relentless fury, leaving behind land as unfamiliar as though it belonged to another planet. Many species vanished in that single catastrophe. Others adapted with astonishing resilience, shaping new niches from the ruins. And life, wounded but unbroken, began its slow rebuild yet again. As the world stabilized, a new kind of empire emerged, one built not on brute strength or dominance, but on community. Small mammals banded together, forming networks of shared labor and protection. Their ability to communicate through subtle gestures and calls allowed them to thrive where solitary creatures struggled. I lived among them for a time, taking a form suited to their size. I learned the delicate art of cooperation, the silent agreements that held their groups together. Their unity became their strength, and through it, they transformed the world around them bit by bit. But life is a restless architect, always seeking new ways to evolve. In later ages, creatures with remarkable intelligence came forth. Primates that could solve problems, use simple tools, and manipulate their environment in ways that seemed to foreshadow something far greater. Their curiosity reminded me of the earliest spark that awakened me at the dawn of creation. I watched them claim territories, form alliances, and navigate their world with an awareness that set them apart from all other beasts. Yet even as these creatures rose, an older, more primal empire lingered, the empire of the great roarers. They were beasts that combined power with cunning, creatures whose calls echoed across valleys like thunder chasing itself through the sky. Their presence dominated every region they touched. Some formed packs with near-unbreakable loyalty. Others ruled solitary domains where no rival dared step. They shaped the behavior of every species around them, turning forests and plains into intricate webs of territorial rule. I joined the roarers for an age, living as one of them to understand their unspoken laws. Through their eyes, I saw the world as a tapestry of paths, scents, and hidden stories etched in the soil. I understood the burden of leadership, of protecting territory, of ensuring the survival of the pack or pride. I felt the weight of choices that balanced hunger against preservation. For a long time, this balance endured. But the world was shifting again, subtle yet unstoppable. Temperatures fluctuated. Seasons lengthened or shortened in unpredictable patterns. Ice crept down from the poles, claiming lands that had once been lush and warm. The Ice Age came slowly, but its approach was inexorable. I felt my fur grow thicker as temperatures dropped. I adapted, as I always had. But many creatures could not. Forests shrank. Grasslands withered. Snowfields spread like pale blankets, smothering the once vibrant empires. Herds migrated farther than ever before, seeking scarce food. Predators followed them across treacherous terrain. Those who failed to adapt vanished forever. Yet even in this age of cold, life persevered with astonishing ingenuity. Wool-covered giants roamed the tundras, tusks curving like crescents of ivory. Predators evolved into broad-shouldered beasts built for endurance in endless snow. Small mammals burrowed beneath layers of frost, creating intricate underground realms. I wandered among these icy kingdoms, marveling at their resilience. Even in a world frozen by relentless winter, I sensed a quiet determination pulsing through every living creature. They endured, as the world had always endured. I felt the world warming long before the last walls of ice collapsed. My awareness stretched deeper than instinct. It reached into the pulse of the planet itself. Beneath the soil, waters began to stir where frost had once slept. Winds softened, Trees awakened, sending roots deeper to claim territories reclaimed from the retreating glaciers. As the air grew gentler, the great beasts of the cold began to fade. Forged for winter, they could not survive the birth of this new age. I remained, though I no longer wore their bodies. I drifted across the thawing world, reshaping myself again into a creature suited for the shifting landscapes. I chose a form agile enough to navigate forests and plains, yet strong enough to witness the birth of something I sensed drawing near. The earth trembled not from catastrophe, but from the quiet, unstoppable footsteps of a new ruler. It was in a warm valley, rich with rivers and vegetation, that I first beheld the emerging species. Small at first, cautious, yet possessed of awareness unlike any I had seen. Their eyes carried an understanding deeper than the sharpest predator's gaze. They grasped stones not as weapons of instinct, but as tools of intention. They shaped wood and bone with purpose. Their movements betrayed a mind not bound to the present moment but reaching, imagining, planning. They were the early humans. I watched them from shadows, wary but intrigued. They were fragile compared to the titans I had known, yet their fragility hid a force greater than claws or fangs. They relied on each other, forming groups united not just by survival, but by a strange, growing sense of belonging. They built shelters, migrated across vast distances, learned to read the land as though the earth whispered secrets only to them. At first, they lived alongside the other beasts, neither dominating nor submitting. They feared predators but respected them. They hunted with caution, taking only what they needed. For a time, balance remained. But evolution is relentless. Their minds sharpened faster than the world could adjust. What other creatures learned over millions of seasons, they mastered in hundreds. They crafted tools that grew more refined with each generation. They discovered how to keep fire, not the wild fire that once shaped the world, but tamed flames, obedient and contained. I sensed the beginning of a new empire, one unlike any the world had seen. As humans spread, the ancient empires of beasts trembled. Predators that once ruled valleys fled deeper into forests. The great herds changed their migration routes to avoid the growing networks of human settlements. Birds altered their flight patterns to escape smoke that drifted endlessly upward. Even the rivers shifted as humans redirected their flow with structures of mud and stone. I moved across continents, witnessing transformation accelerate beyond anything I had observed in previous ages. The humans learned to cultivate land. They learned to store food. They learned to shape metal. Their settlements grew into sprawling domains, then into cities whose rhythms rivaled the migrations of herds. And with each advancement, the wild realms shrank. As their numbers grew, so did their hunger for space. Forests fell. Grasslands vanished beneath the weight of fields and fences. Wetlands dried up, replaced by structures that cut across ancient pathways. The animals I had lived among for countless lifetimes retreated until there were few places left for them to breathe freely. I felt torn between two worlds, one I had known for millions of years and one that was unfolding with breathtaking speed. I roamed the diminishing forests, feeling the weight of memories pressing against the present. I remembered the giants of the First Age, the storms that reshaped continents, the frozen kingdoms of the ice. And now I watched the rise of humankind, an empire built on thought, not instinct. Yet even as their influence grew, the humans remained unaware of me. To them, I was just another creature glimpsed at the edge of their territories, another beast to name, to fear, or to forget. They did not know I had existed since the first breath of the world. But that would soon change. It happened in a valley long marked by ancient migration routes. I wore the body of a predator then, a creature graceful and silent, built for the hunt. I had lived among the last of the great cats, whose ancestors had once ruled the plains with unrivaled majesty. Their numbers had dwindled to a handful, forced into fragments of land surrounded by human expansion. One night, as pale moonlight spilled across the valley, I sensed something approaching, an event unlike any I had encountered before. It was not a storm, nor a wildfire, nor a seismic tremor. It was human ambition manifesting in its most destructive form. They descended upon the valley with tools and fire, intent on reshaping it for their needs. They sought to drive out the predators that threatened their livestock and settlements. They moved with urgency, with fear, with determination. The valley erupted into chaos, animals fleeing, smoke rising, fire crackling. I ran into the depths of the forest, but something pulled me back. Perhaps it was memory, perhaps instinct, perhaps the ancient duty I had carried since the beginning of time. Whatever the reason, I turned and faced the oncoming destruction. In the heart of the valley stood the last of the great cats, a massive, aging predator that had survived countless seasons. Its strength had faded, but its spirit remained fierce. It faced the humans alone, surrounded by the flames they spread. It roared, not in defiance, but in mourning for the empire that was ending. I stepped forward, feeling my ancient essence ignite. For the first time in countless ages, I revealed myself not as an animal shaped by evolution, but as the primordial being beneath. My form shimmered, shifting between the body I wore and the formless energy that defined me. The valley pulsed with the intensity of my presence. The humans froze, stunned not by fear but by awe. They did not understand what they saw, yet they felt the weight of something older than their species, something connected to the Earth's earliest heartbeat. But my revelation was brief. The fire grew too intense. The humans scattered, taking their tools with them, and the valley fell silent except for the crackling of dying flames. I remained long enough to witness the final breath of the ancient cat. It collapsed, its strength exhausted, and the light faded from its eyes. In that moment, I felt the true end of an age, the last roar of the wild world that had shaped me. I left the valley, carrying the memory like a scar woven into my essence. From that day on, I chose forms small and hidden. The age of beasts had ended. The age of humans had begun. And though I still wandered the forests, mountains, and oceans, I did so as a ghost of forgotten eras. But even as human cities grew, even as roads carved through the last strongholds of wilderness, I sensed something unbroken at the core of the world. A resilience. A quiet promise. Life had survived extinction before. It would survive again. The humans, too, would learn. Their minds were powerful, but not infallible. They had the capacity to destroy, but also to restore. I had watched them from the beginning, and I knew that within them lay the same spark that had forged me, the spark of creation. And so I remain, not as a ruler, not as a guardian, simply as a witness.